She's a beauty. T-drums, walnut shell, bird's eye maple inlay there, 12x6. We're going to talk about EQ in this bad boy and a full drum kit. So welcome back, guys. This is part 4 on the basics of EQ. Part 1 we covered the basics, what EQ is, why we need it, etc. Part 2 we talked about EQing male and female vocals. Part 3 we talked about acoustics, electrics and bass guitar. Links for those videos in the description below. And this episode we're going to be talking about drums. Now, I'm aware this is quite a big subject, so I'm going to keep it brief just to get you guys going in the right direction in your home studios so you can start creating awesome music right away. There's more videos on this stuff on my channel. Search for those because there's a couple of videos where I go into quite a lot more depth about how to mix drums, but for the purpose of this one, let's keep it simple right now. All right, so here we are in Logic again, and we've got a song of mine called Don't Stop Breathing. And we're going to talk through some EQ templates to get you going with your own mixes. These are by no means rules, as I've said in all these videos. EQ is very flexible, it's subjective, it depends on the room, the player, the instruments, the microphones. It depends on a lot of things, but these are templates that I find super useful, and if you just throw these on all of your drum instruments, you're going to get a reasonably good mix straight off the bat, and then you can go in and fine-tune it a bit more as you like. Now, drums are a very complicated instrument to mix. Everything bleeds into one, and there's many different elements, and there's lots of problems with cymbal bleed and snare drum bleed, etc. So you can use gates as well as EQ and compressors to clean up all these sound signals, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. Straight into EQ. Let's start with the kick drum. So, kick drum on its own. This was a Beta 52 just in the whole of the kick drum here. So that sounds like a kick drum, right? So obviously we're not putting a high pass filter on the kick drum. For the sub frequency punch, we want to boost about 50 Hertz. Now, if you're listening to that on a phone or computer speakers or even iPod headphones, you're probably not going to hear that, but take my word for it, that's when you can really expand how a kick drum feels by adding in 50 Hertz. Moving on up to 80 Hertz, this is where the real punch can be, certainly live and in the studio. Now moving up to 125 there, you heard those vroom, 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 a bit of a resonance starting to come out, so I definitely want to cut that out. The boxy and woolly sounds that these terms are thrown around with bass drums, they're 200 to 500. Now, if you've got a jazz kit, you might want these in because that's where a kick drum will largely resonate if you've got no dampening in the drum and you've got a light jazz drummer feathering the drum, you want that boom, boom kind of sound. You probably want to leave these frequencies in, but for what I do and most pop rock production, you want to drop out these kind of low mids that can make it sound boxy and boomy. And those are between 2 and 500. Which I've got here. Just kind of sounds like you're hitting a cardboard box with those frequencies in, so let's get rid of those. Moving on up, if you want some attack and presence, again, 1 to 3K is the magic frequency range for that. But if you really want the click, that definition, 3.5 to 5 kilohertz is that frequency range. But as you notice as I'm doing that, you're also getting this high-pitched whistling sound. That's partly from the room, but that is partly from cymbal bleed as well. Now, using EQ, we can attenuate the cymbal bleed by putting in a low-pass filter here. You can hear that audibly getting rid of some of the cymbals, but you're also encroaching on the top end of the instrument there. So to get around that, what we would do is often use a gate, but that's for another video. Let's move on to the snare drum quickly. We're just going to focus on the snare top for now, but you can focus on snare bottom as well. Similar treatment. So first thing is a high pass filter. There's nothing going on below 100 Hz that you need in your mix here. The body and the thickness of a snare drum and the bite can be found at 200 to 250. And as with the kick drum and the toms as well, boxy kind of nasty resonance sounds can be found 300 to 500, 300 to 1,000 even. I'm not really a fan of anything around 500, particularly on drums. It just sounds a bit middly. Sounds like you're hitting a cardboard box next door, in my opinion. So let's get rid of those. So you can hear at 500 there, you got that ping, ping. Let's get rid of that. Don't want to overdo it though. For attack and presence, 1.3K again. That gives you a bit more of a slap to the snare drum sound. I quite like to boost a bit about 10K as well, just for a bit more attack and cutting presence in the mix. Again, without a gate, you're also EQing in a lot of that cymbal sounds, which we may or may not want. Again, gates are useful for that, especially if you're just doing rim shots and no delicate ghost note work. That's a great way to get rid of all that. Now, for the sake of example here, I have put a gate on the toms. Let's hear that with and without. So you're still hearing the psh, psh, where I'm hitting the snare and cymbals at the same time, because they're really loud transients. One way around that is to physically cut out the audio in between any tom hits. That's very laborious, and I haven't bothered doing that on this track yet. Let's get into the EQ. So low pass filter here, probably to about 50. Now, as we can see from this parametric EQ here, we've got an analyzer going on, which is pre-EQ. So what's going on, what we're seeing on the analyzer graph are hot frequencies. And it's telling me there's a lot going on at 200. Now, I would potentially think about cutting that, except, as you'll hear, this is the magic frequency for this particular tom. So that's where the really nice warm sound is there. And if I cut that, it just sounds a bit thin and a bit weak, and it loses its character. So I'm actually going to leave that boosted a little bit. Again, 500, magic frequency for drums. Get rid of it. Instantly you can hear just how much that cleans up the sound and focuses on the warmth that we've got going on at 200. If we want to bring in a bit of attack, again, 1 to 3K. Now, this frequency range, you've got to be careful, because this is where the toms can start sounding quite plasticky. So we don't want to overdo that, but just enough to get that stick definition back. And if you want to attenuate some cymbal bleed, let's bring in a low pass filter as well. But again, be careful, because you're encroaching on the definition of the stick hit there as well. And I've got an extra cut here at 330. There's just a resonance there that I don't like. Let's try a floor tom. Again, with or without a gate. Right, high pass filter again to about 50. Again, there's not much in a floor tom below 50, so let's get rid of that and clean up the mix there. We've got a lot going on at 100 here, according to my analyzer, but let's have a listen. Always check with your ears. Yeah, that's definitely the nice area for that tom. If we take that away, Same as the rack tom, it loses its definition and warmth and body. Moving on up, 500 again. Ugh. There we go, much cleaner. And a stick attack again at 2K. But you can really hear it sounding plasticky if we go too far. And a bit more of a cut at 200. Oh, there's a real honky blah, blah, blah sound at 200, so let's get rid of that. Alright, hi-hats. First thing I'm going to do is a high-pass filter up to 200. We don't need much below that. As you heard then, there's barely anything in the signal there, so we don't need that. Now, small diaphragm microphones such as a Neumann KM184 or a Sennheiser E614 or 914, in my experience, they always sound rubbish about 500. So I pull that out. Again, 500 on drums just isn't a nice frequency, so I get rid of that straight away. On larger diaphragm condenser microphones such as an SE4400 or an Aston Spirit or something, that frequency range is going to be more like 3 to 400. Again, knowing your equipment helps, but also using your ears and experimenting. Experiment with cue points, always use your ears. Don't just take these as gospel rules, but like I said, these will help you in the right direction. Yeah. So what that's doing is focusing the sound more on the top end and the brightness of the hi-hats, which is what we want. So 10k is a frequency I'll definitely put in on the overheads for a glassy sound, but I don't necessarily want that on the hi-hat, and you can hear that can sound a little bit piercing, so you've got to be careful at 10k there, but that sounds good to me. The hi-hat mix definitely sounds cleaner there with more definition on the top end there, which is what we want. Now the overheads are an important part of the kit. Obviously they're capturing the cymbals, but they're capturing the overall sound of the kit, and they're heavily influenced by the room. Now, if you've got room microphones as well, you can obviously use those to capture the sound of the room and the drum kit as a whole from a bit more of a distance. But with overheads, you've got to make the decision, what's your priority? Is it the cymbals, or is it picking up more of the snare drum, or is it a bit of a combination of both? I personally like to use the overheads to get a bit more of the snare body, so 200 hertz again, cutting out anything at 500. We don't need anything below about 200, and then really using the top end to articulate what kind of cymbal sound we want. I personally quite like glassy cymbal sounds. There's an album by Kiss called Psycho Circus, which has just got this beautiful glassy cymbal sound, and 10k is the magic frequency for that. So the higher we take up that high pass filter, the more we're focusing on the cymbals, but like I said, it's a trade-off between that and wanting some more body to the kit. I'm going to keep that just below 200 with a reasonably steep tail off. 200 there's really bringing out the snare drum with some weight, and I want that, so I'm going to keep that in. Let's go to 500. 500 is just those washy, almost sounds like wind going on in the background. Let's get rid of all that. Again, presence, clarity, and attack, anything 2 to 10k. I quite like that there. And if we want the magic glassy sound, let's boost this up to 10k. Let's hear before and after. So it's cleaning the sound up and it's focusing on the top end of the cymbals, which is what we want. So these are all quick fire EQ techniques to get your drum kit in the ballpark of sounding good. I've got a couple of videos where I go into much more detail about the mixing of drums. It's such a big subject, mixing drums. It's very hard to do well. But there's other videos talking about that. Whew. So, drums. That's a big subject. Drums are by far the hardest thing to mix in a studio, possibly only second by a voice. This is my personal experience, but those are the two most important things in your mix. Again, in my opinion, slightly biased as a drummer and a songwriter and someone who's trying to sing. If you've enjoyed this episode, great. Please hit the subscribe button. Click the links below for parts 1, 2, and 3, as discussed earlier. There's going to be more to this series. We're going to talk about compression next, I think, and then gates and reverbs and delays and everything you need to help you on your way with your home studio mixing, whether it's mixing demos for yourself, other people, etc. If you have any questions, if there's anything you'd like to know, leave questions in the comments below, and I'll see if I can do a video on that stuff as well. There's going to be loads of content coming because as a musician, currently temporarily unemployed because of the global situation, which is fun, but that's great because I am taking this opportunity to make loads of videos for you guys and to work on my own album. Subscribe to follow all of that lovely stuff, and we will see you very soon.